Hey, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to finish the discussion that we had in class the other day about the progressivism developing in the cities and the states. And I apologize, no sweet intro music for you or anything like that. I'm just going to get to it. 7:30 in the morning on a Saturday, and who has time for super sweet music? Jared, go ahead, play some rap music, and then get after it here, okay? So we were talking about utilities. If you remember, we talked about the recall, referendum, all of those things developing. Jane Addams, Francis Kelly, and their influence continuing into progressive legislation that started to trickle into different cities, especially in the Midwest. Obviously, we've talked about La Follette and Wisconsin. We gave a shout out yesterday to Tom L. Johnson and the Golden Rule Jones in Ohio. And we started to talk about one of the things that Tom L. Johnson wanted was call for public ownership and operation of public utilities, which is pretty collective, which is, if you remember studying this in Euro, almost borderline socialism. But we said you can't call it socialism in the United States. You got to call it progressivism, okay? Unless you're Eugene V. Debs. Anyway, we got reforms. Continuing with these public utilities, the reform leaders continued to push this notion throughout the nation of wanting to break the power of the city bosses, as well as some of the corruption in the public utilities and the power companies, and they wanted to take the utilities out of the private hands of those companies. So, by 1915, 2/3 of the nation's cities actually owned their own water systems. So we start to see a break from that. And as a result of the progressives' efforts, many cities also came to own and operate gas lines, electric power plants, as well as urban transportation systems, basically as watchdogs for the citizens. Okay? Now, one of the most famous events of this particular era in the reform movement was a huge hurricane that took place at around 1900 in Galveston, Texas. All right, and what we're going to start to see here are new types of municipal governments, kind of pop up. A lot of these ideas were actually started in Wisconsin with those particular ideas, but in result of, you can see the picture here of the devastating Galveston, Texas hurricane. A lot of times when things like this happen, there are the chance for corruption and things of that nature. If you remember when you were little, there was that incident with Katrina in and around, I think it was 2005. And what government, local government, what did they do? What did they mess up? And all those other things, people finger pointing. And, people wanted to make sure that this city would be rebuilt and rebuilt efficiently without planned politics. So Galveston, Texas was the first to adopt a commission plan of government with commissioners. And what happened here is voters elected the heads of the city departments, fire, police, and sanitation, not just the mayor. So, we're talking about kind of getting rid of the spoil system. You couldn't just be the mayor and in result of your election start putting your buddies at the heads of the police, the sanitation, all those other things. So the people were playing a role in putting the best people possible in the positions that were going to help them basically rebuild their city. So that's the impact of Galveston, Texas. And again, if you're kind of interested in that stuff, early weather reports and things like that, there's a lot of interesting stories that came out of Galveston. So I urge you, if you're interested, you have time, which I know you probably don't, but go ahead and look that up. Also in 1913, basically, Ohio storms yet again back on the scene. And what happens in Dayton, they were the first to try a new system. And this new system was one in which an expert manager was hired by an elected city council. So the city council, which was elected by the people, would actually nominate and select somebody that was an expert, even better than them, at running government affairs. And this city expert manager or city controller, sometimes they were called, directed the work of the various departments of the city government and did so, not based on politics, but based on that was their job. All right. And then also in 1923, more than 300 cities had eventually adopted this manager council plan of municipal government. So again, very successful reforms at the local level for the progressives. Okay. Also, in addition, at the state level, reform governors battled corporate interest and championed such measures as the initiative, the referendum, and the direct primary to give, and we've already talked about those things, to give the common people control of their government. Again, a lot of these were relating back to the Wisconsin idea. And in New York, Charles Evans Hughes went after fraudulent insurance companies. In California, Hiram Johnson successfully fought against the economic and political power of the Southern Pacific Railroad. Again, public transportation protecting people from the interests of the corporate greed and those types of things. And in Wisconsin, once again, La Follette establishes a strong personal following as the governor who won for the passage of basically all the Wisconsin ideas that we've talked about, but a series of progressive measures that included, once again, the direct primary, tax reform, and the regulation of railroad rates. So he's on a collision course. He's going to actually run for president. He's not going to win, but the guy is, kind of the progressive rock star before TR comes back and throws his hat into the ring. So, here's the deal. Whether or not to shut down the saloons and prohibit the drinking of alcohol was another progressive debate. We've talked about this since the era of reform after the Second Great Awakening and the initial temperance movement. So, a lot of the champions of reform were actually sharply divided over this issue. Some were all in, others were like, come on now, why do we need to do that? And, while a lot of urban progressives recognized that the saloons were often the neighborhood headquarters of the political machines, basically what they would do there was, hey, people would come in after work. Hey, rounds on me. I'm running for office. And so people would go get drunk or just appreciate the beer or, shot of whiskey or whatever it was that they were drinking, and they would vote for those people. So, a lot of progressives are like, is this how we're electing people based on, who's buying drinks? So, anyway, this was the debate. How much reform needed to really encompass the nation's drinking problem. And anyway, rural reformers, on the other hand, they thought they could clean up morals and politics in one stroke by abolishing liquor. So we see a divide here between the rural areas. They were all for it, church-led groups. But when you get to the city, it was a little bit, they were a little bit more hesitant to go full-fledged into this temperance movement. But so you have the dries or the prohibitionists, and they were determined, they were well organized, as you can see in this sign in this slide. Lips that touch liquor shall not touch ours. And again, I'm thinking right now, I'm thinking right here, not a problem, not a problem. Not going to touch yours. Anyway, I thought you'd get a kick out of that picture. So in 1915, a lot of the prohibitionists or the dries had persuaded the legislatures of 2/3 of the states to actually prohibit the sale of alcoholic beverages. And as we know, as a result of the Volstead Act, prohibition will become the law of the nation with the 18th Amendment in 1918. 1919. Anyway, so we'll get into the next presentation. We're going to talk about progressivism, not in the cities and states, but how it trickled into the national spotlight. Thanks for tuning in.